I think it's an opportunity for us to lower our cost and increase revenue coming into the city. And I think that's what we probably need to be looking about. And I can tell you, looking at the bank, and I've sat on the Historical Zoning Commission and some of the others, I'm assuming you know what you're going to be going through when you go through the historical aspects of doing everything that you have to do to that building. So my suggestion would be to have at it, and let's hear what you have to say then whenever you go through and you come before the, and there's Mary Evans on the Historical Overlay Zoning Committee and some of the other committees that you'll have to go through to do what you want to do to that building out there. I can't imagine it being anything but just a class building when you get through with it.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this before we move on to another item?
Let's move on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll move on to number 10, consideration ordinance 2012-60, an ordinance to amend the City of Franklin Municipal Code Title 16, Chapter 1, relative to sales of goods and wares in the public right-of-way.
I'm going to ask Shauna to come up and join me on this, but this is an item that we have been reviewing for some time, and specifically there has been some proliferation of the sale or distribution of specifically newspapers, but the potential for other items as well in the right-of-way and specifically in the street itself. And this is something that we've been looking at, studying. There's been some activity in other cities related to this. Specifically, City of Brentwood has dealt with this issue and been through some litigation related to it. And so we've gone to school on some of those issues, looked at this issue overall, and have drafted for you a proposed amendment to this ordinance that would essentially prohibit the sale activity or charitable collection activity within the street itself. It can take place on the sidewalk, but it would restrict its activity in the street. And that is entirely driven by concern for safety for those distributing and those trying to drive or bike or be on that street otherwise and use the street for that purpose. We've looked at that, and we also, the amendment itself removes a condition that had previously existed where the police chief could grant a temporary permit for some charity to do those kind of collections within the street. And essentially our conclusion in looking at it is the purpose isn't the matter, the safety is. And that's what we're trying to address by restricting those kind of activities outside in the street area itself, and that's what we're trying to address here. And that's really, in summary, what the amendment does. It says you can do it on the sidewalk, you can do it on private property with, of course, the permission of that private property owner, but as for activity in the street, it's just not safe for all involved, and that we would ask that be restricted. I want to remind you of a couple things that we're not changing that are in that agreement. Again, we're not restricting the distribution, we're just saying where it can happen. There had previously been a condition that provided for the opportunity for those with publications to distribute them also through like a newsstand type of facility. That remains, so there's the opportunity through application to get that outlet as well. And so we are providing options and opportunities for distribution, sale, collection of donations, however you want to look at it, but we're just saying not in the street.
There's a similar situation in Brentwood that there was a lawsuit, and there's a time frame in which they can appeal the outcome of that lawsuit. I wish we would put this off until that time frame is.
I really think by the time you vote on it and may make it through 2 readings, you'll be at that 60-day mark.
It's 60 days from that ruling, and that ruling was 3 weeks ago?
I think so.
So you would deal with this if our normal course of business, you deal with this, first reading December 11th, and second reading January 8th, I think would be the date. So we can look at that, we can look at the exact timing and let you know. If there's appeal, that appeal is likely to last for a significant period of time, so that's just something for you to factor in terms of what you want to do and how you want to handle it. But we would likely know, at least if the appeal's filed related to
Okay,
this.
yeah.
Similar
I'd like
terminology.
those.
Our ordinance isn't exactly the same, but the components related to the activity in the street are pretty much right from that ordinance. But we've got some other options and considerations in our lease that aren't in, or in our, not lease, but in our ordinance, still in the last item, ordinance that are not necessarily in theirs. So I think are actually a little more inclusive in terms of opportunities for folks.
Alderman Burke.
This is A to Z, a safety issue, because I was one of the people that almost sent somebody to the hospital over by the Galleria last year when they stepped in front of my car and I clipped their coat. And it scared the living tar out of me. So I have been one of the people that have been banging the drums for the safety issue the whole time. And I know Eric's tired of hearing me when I called to see that the person was actually standing right in the middle of the street, Mac Hatcher and Franklin Road that other day. It was crazy. I couldn't believe it. And the other thing is, I'm glad these people are in our community selling these newspapers. I think they do a good service, and I'm glad they're here, and I hope they will stay, and I hope they will be a part of our community in their sales. But I do have a question. When we have people out there holding signs for the different sales and things that are going on, we require them to stay on private property, correct? Not on the sidewalk. So if we're requiring them not to allow them on the sidewalk, how do we allow these sales of these newspapers on the sidewalk?
You've just asked a question that takes a semester of law school.
So that is going to be an issue, and
It's been resolved.
I don't know, okay,
It's First Amendment issues.
yeah.
It's the difference between, I think, commercial speech and
Commercial
non-commercial speech.
versus non-commercial, okay. That's
But
what
it's
I-
been 20 years.
That's what I was wondering, if it's the commercial versus the, okay.
It is.
So that's okay?
What? What's okay?
Commercial speech does not enjoy the same
No,
rights as non-commercial speech.
and actually, is this not considered commercial?
It's technically
Or
not.
selling.
Well, the Tennessean also sells, but they have First Amendment protections.
Right, well, because it's a newspaper.
Yeah, it's a newspaper.
Also, will we have something in our amendments or our ordinances, or do we already have, say if the fire department and other communities, I don't know if we've ever done this here, but other communities, you see once a year, firemen stand in the streets collecting with their boots.
They won't be able to
We
do
would not
that.
permit that.
Do we would not permit that?
No.
And do we not permit anyone to do that, or any
No.
organization to do that?
And this
in the
would,
streets?
this would also be the same for a child that wanted to sell something on the side of a street.
Right.
If they were in the median, we would ask that the child
Pesky
move.
lemonade stands.
Get on the sidewalk.
Yeah, we would ask them to move
Not on the
somewhere
street.
closer to a parking lot, so when they do their transaction, they're not doing it in the middle of the street. And a child shouldn't be in the middle of the street
No,
selling
but
lemonade.
if somebody
so.
wanted to do, little kids want to do a lemonade stand, where are they permitted to go?
If they're in a subdivision, like if
Driveway.
yeah, in West Haven, it's their
Sidewalk?
sidewalk, but their sidewalk close to a driveway, so the car would pull into the driveway, and actually you'd make the sale at the driveway,
Yeah.
so the child's not in the road.
Right, because we don't want to get into that, we want to make sure.
Yeah, this covers drug dealers.
It definitely covers drug dealers.
The previous ordinance did allow for a special permit for charitable activities.
it
And really, we looked at that and said, the safety issue doesn't go away for whatever cause you're doing it. We need to make sure we're addressing that, and that's why we restricted all activity in the street of this
Not a bad
nature.
idea.
And we
Yeah,
spoke
busy
with Chief
streets.
Garzrick about this. He knows.
Streets are made for vehicles.
Alderman Glass.
I will admit, I kind of knew this was coming, but I don't as much digest the ordinance because it's written in like a foreign language. So when I read the background, the synopsis, which is in layman's terms, I understood it differently than what we're discussing. So, says, however, an exemption is added for the sale or distribution of newspapers, magazines, periodicals, handbills, flyers, and similar materials, as long as the activity, this is the paraphrase, as long as the activity is not conducted within the street itself. I'm like, okay, I agree with that. But then it says, and materials are not handed to vehicle occupants. And then I highlighted that because that's where you lost me. And then when I look at the legalese, it's like really like, and then you're talking about you can't even be on a sidewalk.
No, you can be on the sidewalk. The transaction needs to take place on the sidewalk. It can't take place in the street.
Okay,
So that's the differentiation.
and I wouldn't say extremely, I'm very versed on the actions of the contributor, and I'm a huge advocate for them. And it's kind of the crux of how they operate. I totally disagree with the fact of them standing in the middle of the road. I think that's obviously extremely dangerous. But it's kind of like UPS only makes right turns, or Cracker Barrels are only so far off the exit. I mean, that's their business model, is to stand where they can literally, Miss Ann, say, here's your dollar, and you do a quick transaction, somewhat like a drug dealer. But this negates them doing their business. I don't understand how this is not saying, we're writing this up nice, but it's not going to allow for them to continue their operation even remotely similar to how it's been designed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to doing a transaction in the street. And whether that's a convenience thing for that motorist or not, they're still transacting that business in the roadway. And that's what we're trying to protect against, because that's where it leads to somebody standing in the middle of traffic. Traffic starts to flow, you know, that's where the risks come into play, is when that activity's happening in the driving area of the street. And that's why we're saying it's safer to be on the sidewalk, and that's where we would say those transactions need to take place.
Well, and a sidewalk, and see, this is where your gray hairs will split. Take a Royal Oaks in 96, and you're in the right-hand turning lane. That has been a spot, if you will, for, I mean, they can stand there on the sidewalk, and the passenger side can buy a newspaper without anybody touching asphalt. Is that gray? Or is
No,
that
the
allowed?
transaction's still happening in the street.
So,
Holding up traffic.
okay, in a perfect world, what's the alternative now? If you can't do it there, are you saying a sidewalk in front of a parking lot that's that's what I'm saying. I don't understand if we're changing this so anything that has been done is not for safety, and I understand that. What's the alternative?
They can go door to door. They can get newsstands. They can sell subscriptions. There are any number of other things that they can do. Nobody is entitled, as a matter of constitutional law, to do their business in the street. That not charitable solicitors, not kids with lemonade stands, not drug dealers, not newspaper salespeople. It's a matter of safety regulation while not infringing someone's rights to conduct their business and disseminate their, in this case, periodical if it happens. But it applies to anyone that would otherwise be doing their thing in the street. So they'll have to adapt.
Yeah, it restricts them to the sidewalk, private property with the authorization of the private property owner, but it keeps the transaction out of the street itself. So it is a change in the model they're using now, that's for sure.
Right.
Alderman Skinner, then Alderman Bransford.
I've noticed in Nashville, they sell these often at the intersection of the interstate exit and the interchange there. So would that be part of this requirement?
Well,
or is that?
there's two issues, I think, with that. With the on and off ramps, I'm not sure in Nashville, but some of them I think are federal properties, and I'm not sure how Nashville's dealing with that. But I know as far as their ordinance goes, they specifically exempted this type of sale to be allowed on their sidewalks and in their streets. So we can't really compare ourselves to Nashville.
But would this apply to interstate here?
It would here.
It would.
If they're considered streets in our community, they would be under this ordinance.
Alderman Bransford.
How will we be communicating this? Is this one business owner, multiple business owners? I mean, it seems like a lot of folks are doing this. How we will be communicating this? Or would just be writing warning tickets or what?
What I'd expect we would do is, once this became effective, we would first give warnings, inform folks that that's the expectation and that the ordinance has been amended to reflect this, and let them know where they can do it and where they can't. And then, give them some opportunity to learn that and comply. And then if it's not complied with after that, then you'd start to write citations.
Okay, 15 minutes enough?
Yep.
Seven?
We'll see you at 7 o'clock.